In their first practice and getting beaten handily by the New England Patriots, the Commanders turned their focus toward getting better, not staying stuck in the past. That and more right now on Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Commanders. I am David Harrison, your guy on the ground covering the Washington Commanders for WUSA 9 and right here with you 5 days a week. You can also find me writing about the Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com. You can follow me on X at DHarrison82. I want to thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen or view. Special thank you goes out to all of the everydayers who come through for every single episode, especially the everydayers and just the listeners who may not be everydayers that introduce themselves to me again on practice or at practice on Sunday. As always, greatly appreciate every person who supports the program and takes time to introduce themselves to me. So thank you to all of the fans that I met out there at practice on Sunday. Look forward to meeting even more of you at games and other events throughout the season. If it's your first time coming through the show, appreciate you coming through. Hopefully you like what you hear and you come back again soon. If everybody out there, if you haven't already subscribed for free on YouTube or wherever you're listening to today's episode, please take the time to do so now. Coming up on today's episode, we're going to hear from rookie wide receiver Jaylin Lane. We're going to discuss a day of practice where Jayden Daniels completed just one pass. But first, let's talk about moving forward. All of that is coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. The key to every loss, preseason, regular season, even postseason, to a certain extent, is to take the lessons forward, leave the baggage behind. And that's what the Commanders aimed to do on Sunday. Following their preseason loss to the New England Patriots, head coach Dan Quinn's message on Sunday ahead of practice was about not dwelling on the negative and about assessing and evaluating the action that took place, not just on Friday night, but also on Wednesday at the joint practice. He opened up his pre-practice press conference talking about the military concept of after-action reviews. And I know that after-action reviews, after-action reports, whatever you want to call them, they're not exclusive to just the military, right? But clearly, it is something that is used very often in the military. I think every single branch, every single unit, doesn't matter if you're special forces, doesn't matter if you're basic forces, not really a term, but if you're conventional, if you're special, if you've got specialized training, if you're a rapid deployment team, or if you're at home in the field doing training, whatever it is, pretty much every operation the military has an after-action review or after-action report that follows it. And Dan Quinn on Military Appreciation Day at Washington Commanders practice kind of went back and mentioned which he's done several times as the head coach of the Washington Commanders, that he has several friends who have served in the military, and they've kind of passed on some notes to him, passed on some stories to him, and some things that they do in the military, learn in the military, whether they're SEALs or what have you. And those things, or some of those things, are things that Dan Quinn has instituted into his own coaching practices. After action reports are one of those things. And if you've been in Everyday for a little while, you're going to remember that our Tuesday episodes of Locked On Commanders are our after action review episodes. So it all tracks, right? It's all definitely on the right track. And clearly, I agree with Dan Quinn doing that. I think that they're very valuable tools. So Dan Quinn said, quote, "What went right? What went wrong? What would you want to do different?" In that space of assessing it, there's no levels. It's just ideas and thoughts and ways to do it better. It keeps the emotion out of it and allows you to focus on the task at hand. End quote. And yeah, I think it's a very, very good way to discuss the point of an AAR, what they're for, what they do, and what they evaluate, because you really do. You take the personal out of it. You take the emotion out of it. It doesn't matter. It's not about, well, this team leader did that, or that squad leader did this, or that quarterback did that, or that cornerback did this. No, it's the entire operation and function. How do we get better? And certainly they can be effective. Tell the Truth Monday is something that we've heard a lot about from Dan Quinn since he got over here to the team. And that's something they do after every game, right? Obviously, the theory is that Monday is usually the day after the game because most games are on Sundays. Well, this game was on Friday. They flew home late Friday night, early Saturday morning. Players had the day off. So early Sunday, they held Tell the Truth Sunday, where players came in. They found out where they did well, where they didn't do so well. The team got a talking to about where they did well, where they didn't do so well. And that's just an important part of swallowing those lessons again and kind of leaving behind the extra junk that you don't need to carry forward. Again, DQ saying, quote, these are the things that we saw in the game. These are the things we want to identify. It helps. Then you say, these are the things that we want to work on this week as players and as coaches. Then you flush it. A lot of new commanders in their first one. Some hit the standards, some didn't. And that's the good part about Tell the Truth Monday. You point it all out. End quote. Another really good practice that I feel like Dan Quinn has adopted and has introduced here in Washington as the head coach of the Commanders. And it's a necessary process, especially after a game that was bogged down by so many mistakes, so many penalties, special teams breakdowns, just mental errors across the field, whether it be errant throws, missed blocks, missed tackles, penalties, obviously, missing your lanes, just drops, all kinds of stuff. Just there really wasn't an avenue of mental mistake that can be made on a football field that somebody on the Washington Commanders roster didn't make on Friday night. And look, some players had really good games, right? Josh Connerly Jr., rookie right tackle, had a pretty solid outing, right? I think he had a pretty good game, given it's his first real full-fledged NFL action. And again, if you go back to our post-game episode, it really stood out to me was in the locker room getting interviewed, 5 questions thrown at him, and he answered them all in less than a minute because he really wasn't feeling it. You know what I mean? He was just dejected because he doesn't want his team to look like that. Didn't matter that he had the game he had. What mattered was the game the team had. And that's the right mentality. That is the mentality that you want to be able to have. Yeah, he's going to have a sit down with Bobby Johnson, his own line coach, and all this other stuff. And he's going to get told what he did right and where he could get better. And certainly there's going to be a focus on individual. But that night in the locker room, Josh Connerly Jr. wasn't about the individual. He wasn't worried about how the media was going to portray him and his debut and all that stuff. All he knew is that his team just got whooped and he didn't want that to happen ever again. Quarterback Jayden Daniels had another press conference here training camp after the practice. He didn't play the game, but he also echoed that sentiment of looking forward. Jayden Daniels saying, quote, whatever happened last week, joint practice, preseason game, really doesn't matter anymore, end quote. And again, that's kind of what AARs are for. It's kind of what Tell the Truth Sunday or Tell the Truth whatever day it is going to be for, is again, taking the lessons. And Jayden, had a pretty good practice by all accounts, right? Threw a couple of touchdowns, really efficient in the passing game, connected with Zach Ertz on quite a few plays during the practice, didn't play in the preseason. So his review probably pretty positive, right? But you take the important stuff and then you leave all that behind, including patting yourself on the back and going into the next week saying, oh, look how good I did last week. Now let's get this week started right. Now you want to get the week started right, but for different reasons, right? The team did get some tough news on the injury front. Dan Quinn confirming to us Sunday afternoon that offensive tackle Lucas Niang, who recently joined the team, veteran offensive tackle, previously played with the Chiefs, tore his ACL in the game Friday night, and he is going to be out for the season. DQ calling it a quote-unquote bummer and said that Niang, quote, had done a nice job for us in a short time, end quote. So that's some pretty tough news on the offensive line depth avenue. During Sunday's practice, offensive tackle Laremy Tunsil came up after a play holding his groin. After that play, came off the field, was working with trainers, stretching, things like that. Stayed on the field, right? Didn't leave, didn't go into the building, didn't go into the medical tent or anything like that. So I'm walking around after the practice, and he seemed to be fine, right? He wasn't limping or grimacing or anything like that. And he wasn't, so a little bit of a peek behind the curtain, right? If a guy gets injured during a practice and he's like injured, he's actually not allowed to be interviewed after practice. And he wasn't interviewed anyway, but not because we were told that we weren't allowed to interview him, just we all had kind of different focuses for the practice. So Laremy Tunsil, a little bit of a scare, certainly, but I think he's all right. Again, hard to tell, not a doctor, and certainly not a doctor that can tell just by watching the guy whether or not he's injured, but doesn't seem to be too much of a concern. Obviously, we'll be looking out for him on Monday for practice, then again on Tuesday as well, before the players hit their next off day on Wednesday. Wouldn't be surprised to see them ramp him down on Monday. Monday's supposed to be a jog through anyway. And then even Tuesday, maybe, do some individuals, but no teamwork. He's a veteran. He doesn't need a lot of those reps. So it would just be more of a precautionary thing, I assume. But despite the loss, despite the injuries, Dan Quinn expressed a very strong confidence in the depth of the team. There's several position groups, including safety, cornerback, and running back, with a lot of competition and a lot of talent. After the weak performance Friday night, things looked and sounded just a bit different when we got to the practice field on Sunday. That and more coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of the year. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season is back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. This year, Locked On Commanders is playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too. After watching the Commanders go through their own Tell the Truth Sunday this week, it's a great reminder that managing a fantasy team is all about making those tough, honest assessments. You have to look at what went wrong, figure out who didn't hit the standard, and make a plan to get better. And there's no better way to raise the stakes on that process than with Yahoo's new Guillotine Leagues. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout August. And to kick it off, they dropped their new Guillotine Leagues, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated every week until there's only one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. If you want your players to play with more intensity, sometimes you have to ramp up the intensity as coaches. That is exactly what the Washington Commanders appeared to do on Sunday. After a preseason performance that lacked the team's standard of physicality and discipline, the team returned to the field on Sunday for a session that I sort of nicknamed an intensity drill. That's what I'm calling it. I don't know what the team called it. It's just kind of what I'm calling it. Looked like a little bit of a mix of like run fit session, right? Where defenders practice getting into the right fits, making sure they pursue the ball carrier at the right angle, a little bit of gunner, a little bit of ball carrier, a little bit of pass catching. But the trick of it, or the thing that really stood out to me, was everybody did it. There were reps where Bobby Wagner was catching a ball, turning upfield between two tackling dummies, hitting the lane. And, Frankie Luvu's on one side, and I don't know, Jeremy McNichols is on the other side, just working on fitting that run, funneling him in, locking him down as a ball carrier. And, don't quote me on those exact matchups, but you get the idea. Every player going through, especially except for the quarterbacks, right? We're not going to have quarterbacks out there doing that. That's a little bit crazy. But it really just, and it just looked different. It felt different. It sounded different. The coaches, were a little bit louder than usual in those first drills of practice. Typically after the warm-ups and the bags drill that we've seen so often, typically they work on maybe a little bit of special teams or maybe some individualized group work or even individual position work. This was the first time that I recall, and certainly, confirmation bias being a thing for everybody. Perhaps it's something that I was looking for as well, but I asked some other media members on the sidelines, like, hey, do they sound a little bit louder to you today? Or is this different? Like, is this something that we've normally seen? And, pretty much everybody that I've talked to at least agreed that it was a little bit of a different type of drill. And that, the coaches were a little bit loud. They weren't Eric Bieniemy loud. All right, let's not get crazy. But there's certainly just a little bit more intensity, right? And the great thing about it is it didn't come across as you as players are in trouble. You as players didn't do well Friday night. You as players, now you're going to get it, right? Like, that didn't really come across that way. It was more just, we're going to pick things up. We need to up the intensity. We need to up the energy level a little bit more and get this thing going the right direction. That's really what it felt like. So, I don't know how the players took it, but obviously, as a sideline observer, I thought it was a pretty good thing to do. So talking about Jayden Daniels, as we do in these practice review episodes, 11 on 11s, Jayden Daniels completed one pass. However, a little bit caveat, there were a lot of runs in this session. The defense had some issues with run containment, things like that. So certainly there seemed to be a focus on the run. I don't know if that's the reason they did it. That's part of the trick here to these practices, is you don't always necessarily know why they're lining up and doing the drill that they're doing, right? Like, the game situation's kind of pretty clear, right? We want the defense to get reps defending a 2-minute drive. We want the offense to get reps running a 2-minute drive. But sometimes, like, hey, we're doing a run fit drill here, so we want, the offense is going to run the ball a lot, and we're going to practice our run fits. That's the case. It may not look a whole lot of exciting, or you may not get a whole lot of excitement from the offensive side of things, but there's a reason for it. Drive one, first play was a run by Brian Robinson Jr. Second play, an end around to Deebo Samuel. Maybe it's call it a jet sweep, whatever you want to call it, reverse. But you get the idea. Deebo Samuel started on one side of the formation, ran to the other, got the ball, ran around the edge, was led by a group, a cadre or a platoon of blockers that included Ben Sinnott, included Jaylin Lane was out there leading. But Laremy Tunsil was the lead blocker, the left tackle. That's actually the play that he pulled up on afterwards and was kind of holding his groin muscle area, came off the field after that play. Next play was an incomplete pass to Jaylin Lane, broken up by Marshawn Lattimore. Marshawn just did a really good job of getting through, putting the arm in there in Jaylin Lane's hands and keeping him from making that catch. Really good play by Marshawn Lattimore there on a good route and a good ball from Jayden Daniels, and then a run by Brian Robinson Jr. to finish off that first set of 11 on 11 drives for Jayden Daniels. The next one only ran one pass, I should say, for Jayden. He completed that to Jeremy McNichols. Play action to Jeremy, and then Jeremy kind of just settled into the middle of the field. Jayden found him for a dump-off completion pass. Drive 3 and drive 4, both were red zone drills. Red zone starting at the 5 first. Incomplete pass to Tay Martins. Hit him in the hands. Look, it's not an easy catch. It's not a ball that you just say, you have to make it, as in I can make that in the backyard on the 4th of July while, waiting for the burgers to burn in my backyard. But it's one of those ones that as an NFL receiver, it hits you in the hands. It hits you in the hands flush. I know it's tough, but you got to make that catch. So I labeled it a drop. Some people around me kind of thought I was being a little harsh, and that's okay. If I am, but it hit him in both hands. It hit him flush. I call it a drop. Next pass incomplete, intended for KJ Osborne, broken up by Trey Amos. Really kind of displaying that length, really displaying that athleticism, the ability to kind of just keep up with receivers and be in the right place. Offense also was flagged for a holding penalty on the play. That was it for drive 3 as far as passes are concerned. Drive 4, 3 passes. First ball, and again, we're in the red zone at the 5-yard line. First pass was intended for John Bates, a little bit too high for the tight end to get to. Second pass was intended for Luke McCaffrey. Von Miller was offsides on the play. So Jayden Daniels did what every quarterback does when a player is offsides. He threw it up, gave his receiver a chance. So again, it's incomplete, but you don't really hate the incompletion. And from a stat line perspective, it wouldn't have counted as an incompletion. It would have been a non-play, right? Another incomplete pass, Luke McCaffrey. This one knocked away by Trey Amos. Again, just flexing that length a little bit. So unofficially 1 for 6. Again, because of the penalty, really 1 for 5, but a lot of running as well in these drills. A PBU by Marshawn Lattimore, a PBU pass broken up, 2 PBUs by Trey Amos, and then 1 drop by a receiver, Tay Martin, in the end zone. And, just going to say, some other receivers probably would have caught that ball. Play of the practice, I'm going to give that to Trey Amos, the rookie cornerback, defending Luke McCaffrey, deep left corner of the end zone. Really good defense by Trey. Really good ball by Jayden Daniels. All right, we have reps where we talk about defense was in the right place, but the ball and the catch was just better. This time, the defense was just better. The ball was in a good place. The receiver was in the right place. The defender was just better. And that's how these things are going to happen. That's exactly how you want to see them happen. Trey Amos continuing to have a very solid training camp here in his first season in the NFL. 3 practice standouts that are not Jayden Daniels. Obviously, Jayden is going to stand out every practice because he's a starting quarterback. But standout number 1, Trey Amos, again, consistently in position to make plays. Had another PBU, pass intended on a pass intended for KJ Osborne. And again, this follows up his preseason performance where, it didn't go well for the team, but for Trey, it went pretty well. Second star is going to be the pass rush. We're going to credit both Frankie Louvu and Von Miller on this one, 2 guys who did not play Friday night against the New England Patriots. The defense can generate a lot of consistent pressure. Dorrance Armstrong Jr. got in there. Frankie Louvu got in there for a practice sack. Later on, Louvu and Von Miller both credited for pressures by me. I'm the guy who gives you in these practice notes. If I tell you it's a sack or a pressure, I'm the one crediting for it. I'm your source. Pass to Zach Ertz, or a pass was intended for Zach Ertz, was brought by pressure. So that's a pass that we did not label as a completion because it would have been a sack, right? Cornerback Marshawn Lattimore, again, key play early to get his hands up, or in between rather, Jaylin Lane's hands to break up an early pass, consistent coverage, and important player throughout all of the team sessions on Sunday. So the guys who did not play on Friday, a lot of them stepping up on Sunday, and that's what you hope to see on Monday, where we assume all of these guys are going to play. I was about to say they're going to play more, but if you play at all, you're going to play more than they did on Friday, right? Coming up, we caught up with rookie receiver Jaylin Lane after practice on Sunday for a quick conversation about his first NFL game experience and where he found the most value from his week in New England. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you in part by Game Time. We have all been there, logging on early, waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show that you have been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. Well, that's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. And after breaking down today's practice report, it's all about getting a clear view of the action. We saw who stood out and what the view on the field was really like. Well, Game Time gives you that same confidence when you buy tickets. The app shows you a panoramic seat view, so you know exactly what your view will be before you buy. No surprises, unlike a tough day for the offense in the red zone. Take the guesswork out of buying your concert, your show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create your account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Sunday after practice, we caught up with Washington Commanders rookie wide receiver Jaylin Lane, who has been impressing as a returner and pushing for his spot on the wide receiver depth chart.
They were, so it was really cool.
When it came to your performance personally, when it came to the speed and physicality of, your first preseason game, how do you think you did?
Yeah, I feel like I did good. You look at the film, there's always stuff to correct, but, didn't do a lot. But, I feel like, for my first time stepping on the field, it was fun and, I had a good time.
Yeah, not the outcome you guys, of course, wanted, but what was Dan's maybe message after the game or even heading into today's practice?
He just talked about, it wasn't being up to our standards, playing fast and physical and, penalty-free mental football, just things like that. And we talked about in the meeting. And the only way to clean it up is at practice. So, kind of the emphasis was, being mentally sound and, playing fast and things like that.
Yeah, based on that, did it feel good to get back out on the practice field today?
Definitely. After any L, you're always ready to get back on and, start working to clean that up so we can be ready for Cincinnati come next Monday.
Yeah, and how do you quickly, flip the page? I know you're used to it being, the player that you are, but here in the NFL level, how do you turn the page quickly and get ready?
Yeah, you just got to, take the coaching points in the film, jot down whatever notes, and then after that, just flush it and then, do your best to try to correct everything. Don't dwell on it, and you never get too low. That's how you go.
Getting the live reps as a punt returner as well, kind of how did you feel about that?
It felt good. I always feel kind of comfortable and natural back there, and it didn't feel too much different than what I'm used to, so it was pretty cool.
When you look back at the joint practice and the game, kind of your first two NFL experiences against an opponent, where do you feel like you drew the most benefit?
Honestly, yeah, just seeing just the different competition, going against our guys every day, obviously, they're going to pick up on tendencies. I pick up on tendencies with them. So, the competition's obviously still there, but it was cool to go against other guys that, haven't seen me, I haven't seen them, and, kind of work moves and, just kind of challenge myself in that way.
How much have you encountered by Tech fans when these Commander fans?
Every single day. It's been cool. Every time I come out here, I get at least 4 or 5 Go Hokies, so it's pretty cool.
You got to talk to the stadium. You get your first punt return for a touchdown. They got to play some Metallica for you.
Nah, facts, man. I need some Inner Sandman for sure.
Jaylin Lane continues to show confidence as a player to watch as we get closer to roster cuts, and I'm not even joking. I'm going to talk to whoever I have to get the stadium to put Enter Sandman into the playlist for when Jaylin Lane scores touchdowns. That's going to do it for today's episode. Next time on Locked On Commanders, we are back in Ashburn. I've got it coordinated to interview a couple of coaches about some things that happened on Friday night. We'll see if they're not too busy to give me a little bit of time on Monday after practice. So hopefully we'll have that for you. If not, we'll have something for you. We'll always have something to talk about Washington Commanders because there's always something going on. In the meantime, if you've got questions or comments, you can text me directly by becoming a Locked On Commanders insider at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Shout out to the 5 new insiders we had specifically subscribe during the game on Friday. I got to tell you, I've had people unsubscribe during bad games, which look, I don't take it personal. I'm not out there playing. I'm just talking. We're just talking. I got it. I get it. But I have actually never had people subscribe in the middle of bad games. 5 subscribers during the bad game. I appreciate it. We had a little bit of group therapy in the text messages on Friday night, and hopefully we're all feeling a little bit better about what went down as we get a few days away from it and see some progress, right? So again, joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. You can text me. I'm going to text you. It's a lot of fun usually. For your second listen, check out Locked On Bets. Betting experts Lee Sterling and Kevin Rogers have daily Major League Baseball locks and can't miss football futures. Find Locked On Bets on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And to the everydayers, I see you every day. I appreciate you every day. And today, I want to thank you. Until next time, stay safe, be kind to one another. We'll talk again real soon right here on Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.